Hello, this is Valerie Aiello, and you're listening to Idea Diary. Thanks for coming back to my office and hanging out. So, I was listening to something about Generation Z that I just found kind of interesting, and then I kind of went down a rabbit hole of just looking up traits for Gen X. And I realized that I'm actually not Gen X. I'm a Xennial, which is being born between 1977 and 1985, which made total sense to me because I have an older sister that's 5 years older than me. You know, we definitely have a lot of the same experiences and all that stuff growing up, but there does feel like a difference between a real Gen Xer and myself. I just kind of always felt like there might be a little bit of a difference, but now I know there is a difference between a real Gen X person and a Zillennial. I didn't grow up having internet in my house, but we definitely had it in the schools. It wasn't like insane if you had internet in your house. It was just not something that every single household had because you didn't really need it yet. You needed it maybe when you were at work, I guess. I was in high school, so when the internet was kind of happening. But we just used it at school. I don't even really remember doing homework at home. I guess I did a little bit. I wasn't like the highest achiever as far as school came into play. I was more concerned with my friends and having fun than actual schoolwork. One thing about Xennials is that they're called the Oregon Trail generation, which totally resonates with me. I remember being in elementary school and playing Oregon Trail. So we saw the DOS turn into Windows, turn into eventually getting the first Macintoshes and stuff like that. I remember having a pager in high school, and I remember we had second lines. So your parents had a telephone line, and the kids had a second telephone line, and they would just ring differently. I definitely remember that happening. I remember, being the first on social media, so I was immediately signed up to Friendster probably months after it existed. And then I immediately signed up for MySpace probably as soon as it existed. And I immediately signed up for Facebook as soon as it existed. My age group was just like right on the cutting edge of everything that was happening, where my sister didn't really care about that stuff, being 5 years older than me. She she never got into social media. Actually, she just doesn't like it and never did. And her job necessarily never required her to have that, so it just feels like a very different experience as far as like what our technology experience was. I grew up playing Nintendo, and my sister did not really play video games. It was all there, but it's just not something, it wasn't a part of her life as much as my age group. Gen Xers are the smallest generation, which I never knew, just something that I learned. Gen Xers are open-minded. They're very independent, so they played outside all day long. I experienced that, but also at the same time I was at home playing Nintendo. As soon as I got home from school, I was like glued on to video games. I did play outside somewhat, but pretty much at about 10 years old, I was Super Mario Brothers all the way, all day long, forever and ever. So Gen Xers and me, Zillennial, both our parents went to work. Definitely you would get home from school and there would be nobody home, and you'd make your own snack and you'd do your own thing and you'd watch TV, and it was definitely independent. I do think that Gen X probably had like the coolest movies, and I think music was kind of cool, maybe like the 50s when rock and roll started, 50s, 60s. It's not kind of like whenever rock and roll started, the music was always cool. And the 90s kids like me, we kind of got the last of the really cool music. I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, after 2007, either it was really hard to find cool music or it just wasn't as good anymore. I kind of flip-flop between what I really think about that. But anyways, people that were kind of in their 20s in the 80s, they got a lot of really cool music and then spent their 20s listening to 90s music. So they were probably the one generation that remembers a whole lot of really cool music. And then being 90s kids, we did listen to old music too. It wasn't just like old music sucks. We really appreciated all decades of rock music and jazz and all that stuff. So we didn't lose it. Whereas I feel like some of the kids now, they don't really have any interest in anything except what's the new song that's coolest right now. But that is changing with TikTok and all that stuff, where the older songs are kind of better, and that's what people are kind of using for their TikToks and for the music, for advertising music, and for music that's put into movies is kind of like the older songs because they're just kind of better in some way, which is, I hate saying that because I don't want to be the old person that's like, your new music sucks, because I don't think that. It's just the volume and the amount of good songs from the 90s to before was just a huge amount of good songs. Like a band could make an entire album of the best songs you've ever heard in your whole life. And now it's hard for like a band to write one good song, or it seems that way. For us, we were told to go to college no matter what, get a degree in underwater basket weaving, but you have to have a degree. We did have school loans, but it wasn't like whatever the millennials got sucked into with the huge, gigantic $100,000 student loans. If you actually did have a student loan and you're a Gen Xer or a Xennial, it was kind of a manageable size of a student loan. Gen Xers, Millennials aren't making as much money as their parents. So Gen Xers and Millennials are a little bit more frugal. I'm not sure of the spending habits on the Millennials, but Millennials seem to like expensive things even though they don't make a lot of money. So, and that's just like an observation for me. I don't know what the truth is. So apparently Millennials, when they have these huge student debts, they only about 44% of them work in a job where they actually even need a degree. That's a huge amount of people with giant student debts that never even needed them in the first place, which is why the Gen Zs are not going to college, because unless there's something really specific that they know that they want to do immediately at 18 years old, there's no reason to go to school, because all the jobs, Twitter, Facebook, Google, none of them are requiring you to have a degree to work there, because what these big companies want is basically for you to go to Google school, and they're going to train you to be exactly what they want you to be, instead of spending 4 or 5 years in college and then coming to work for them, and then they have to train you anyway. So Generation Z kids are a little bit happier than the millennials because they don't have these huge student debts. I don't think credit cards are as popular with the younger kids. And just some things that I looked up about Gen Z, because I was curious, was Gen Z, they're more realistic, they're independent, so they're like really a DIY. They like to do it themselves, or they feel like they can only count on themselves. They can't really count on anyone else. Gen Z kids are more private. That was interesting to me, because I definitely feel like it's a smarter thing right now to not put everything onto these platforms, like how we've been doing. I'm guilty of it too, but not putting your entire life for free, giving all these Facebook, Instagrams, just basically free content. Yeah, I think that's pretty much over. We're just gonna see a few more years of that, I think. Gen Zers are multi-talented. They like having multiple roles, which I can totally see being a thing, because if you say are into YouTube or you're into video gaming, you have to be able to set up a whole streaming system. So you've got to be like your IT guy. You've got to know your camera work. You got to know your editing work. You've got to be the talent on screen. and you have to be able to produce everything. And there's just like a huge amount of jobs happening that used to be like the job. You know, you would just be good at editing, or you would just be the camera guy, or you would just be the photographer. Now you're just kind of like everything all at once. Apparently the Gen Zs, they like to work alone, and they have a shorter attention span, but they process info the fastest over all the generations. They're good multitaskers, and they'll learn fast. They want to learn fast, so they want courses. They don't want to spend a full semester with wasting time trying to learn something. They'll pick it up a lot faster than the previous generations. So the thing with millennials is they like to work in groups. I think that is because of they have low self-esteem, because, I mean, this is what they say, is that millennials got awards for everything. Their parents told them they were special, and then when they got into the real world, they realized they're not special, and your job isn't going to give you an award for coming in last. So they all have low self-esteem. They kind of grew up on social media in high school. Social media isn't the most healthy thing in the world. They didn't have to build friendships the same way that people had to build friendships without the internet. So they're a little bit more lonely. They don't have as solid of friendships as the generation before them. So millennials are kind of depressed. I don't think they're making as much money as their parents did. Add all that up, and it's like, I don't know, I kind of feel a little bit bad for millennials. Along with the like online dating thing becoming super popular, they don't even have to like go out and meet a guy or meet a girl. They have to just everything's handed to them in some weird way. You would think it's nice and it's faster, but it's like it takes away some of the things that make being a human special. So I think the Gen Zers are kind of realizing that, and supposedly they're just like a little bit more in tune with, let's put the phone away and let's have a real experience. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that Gen Z is kind of realizing what's good about what happened with the Gen Xers and what happened with the Millennials. They're kind of taking the good parts of both and creating their own little personality and their own little world. And apparently Gen Zs are going to have the most millionaires in their generation than ever before, and most of them will be entrepreneurs. That's pretty awesome. I don't know. I thought the Xennial thing came into my world today, so I just thought I would talk about that. And then I was just kind of researching a little bit about the different generations, and sorry I didn't talk about it in order. I just kind of like rambled on a bit, but I do think it's important for businesses to understand the different generations as far as communicating and working with their employees. I do think it is something to consider and to kind of show that you appreciate the different ages, because Gen Zers are now like 23 and between 21 and 23. So they're definitely in the workplace. Everyone's got to kind of get along and respect everyone's different personality traits and how they grew up, because it is pretty different if you think about it. And also, not to mention, if you're making products for certain age groups, it's always good to kind of understand where those people are coming from and why they would buy something or not buy something, what they need and what they want. Anyways, I've never really paid attention to it much. I think that is just something that's going to be on my mind as trying to make stuff valuable for somebody that's 55 and somebody that's maybe 21 or something. And I guess that's the show. And I still don't know how to end the show, so I'm just going to play the music.